All right, so in this case, we're going to learn how to solve equations, rational equations. Rational because it's a fraction, equations because there's an equal sign. So to begin with, I look at the denominators and I ask myself, what values of n will make the denominators equal to 0? And I'm going to say, well, 3. So that means n cannot be 3. Once again, I look at the denominator, I look at the values that can make the denominator equal to 0, and those values I will not accept. The reason why, because in a fraction, we cannot have a 0 at the bottom. Then, I think of my least common denominator. In this case is n minus 3. I am going to multiply every term, whether it's a fraction or not, every term I'm going to multiply by my LCD. That way, I'm going to get rid of fractions. I'm going to multiply the first fraction by n minus 3. I'm going to multiply this term by n minus 3 and this one by n minus 3. I multiplied everything by my LCD. The n minus 3 with this n minus 3 cancel out, and I just have an n. On the second term, let me distribute the 1, so that gives me plus n minus 3 equals, here let me cancel the n minus 3 with the n minus 3, and I get n plus 3. Once again, I multiply by the least common denominator to get rid of fractions. Now, let me simplify each side. I have the 2n minus 3 is equal to n plus 3. Let me move this n to the left. This negative 3, let me move it to the right. Don't forget to switch the signs. So I get that 1n is equal to 6. I check on my list of the values that I said I could not accept, just to make sure my 6 is not there, which is not. So in this case, I can accept it. N is equal to 6. Whenever you guys type it, I just expect the number 6. Let's take a look at question number 2. My focus is on the least common denominator. When I factor this, I have x plus 1 twice. When I factor the second one, let me just write this as x plus 1 twice. And obviously on my third fraction, my factor is x plus 1. When I look at each of my parentheses, I ask myself, what values of x will make the denominators, the parentheses at the bottom, equal to 0, and I get x equals negative 1. So that's the value that I cannot accept, because I don't want zeros at the bottom. Now my least common denominator is going to be x plus 1 twice. We talk about least common denominator for the last 2 weeks. All right, on my first fraction, let me multiply this by my least common denominator to get rid of the fractions. Here I'm literally going to do x plus 1 to the second powered. Over here I'm going to do x plus 1 twice. All right, so on my first fraction, x plus 1 squared basically gets rid of the 2 parentheses. I have a 3 equals. On my second fraction, that cancels out, so I have 1. Now on my third fraction, only one x plus 1 cancels out. So now let me distribute the 2. So that gives me plus 2x plus 2. All right, let me solve for x. I have that 3 is equal to 2x plus 3. I combine my like terms. Let me subtract the 3. I have that 0 is equal to 2x. Let me divide by 2. 0 divided by 2 is 0. I double check on my list of the numbers that I could not accept, just to make sure 0 is not there. So x equals 0 is a good answer. Whenever you guys type it, I'm just expecting the number 0. All right, let's take a look at question number 3. My focus is on the denominators. I'm going to factor the first denominator. That gives me x minus 4, x plus 2. My second denominator is just x plus 2, and here the x minus 4. So the values of x that I cannot accept are 4 and negative 2. Once again, I'm looking at the values of x that make the bottom equal to 0, any parentheses equal to 0, and those are the values that I cannot accept. Now my least common denominator is going to be x minus 4, x plus 2. Let me multiply each of my terms by x minus 4, x plus 2. And here at x minus 4, x plus 2. So my first fraction, the x minus 4 with the x minus 4 cancel out. The x plus 2 with the x plus 2 cancel out. So I only have 4x plus 12 equals. Here, the x plus 2 with the x plus 2 cancel out. Distribute the 1. I have 1x minus 4. Here, the x minus 4 with the x minus 4 cancel out. Distribute the 4. So that's going to give me plus 4x plus 8. One thing before I move on, though. If this was a minus instead of a plus, I would have given the minus sign to this 4. And then distribute the negative 4. If that plus sign was a minus. It wasn't, so I just left it a positive 4. Okay, so now let's continue. Let me simplify each side. I have 4x plus 12 equals 5x plus 4. I'm going to subtract the 4x. I'm going to subtract the 4. So I have that 8 is equal to 1x. I double make sure that 8 is a good number. It is. So when I type this, I would just type in 8. Now let's take a look at question number 4. My denominators, it's 4x. So I start by asking myself, what values of x I cannot accept? Those are the values of x that are going to make the denominators equal to 0. So 0. Then I ask myself, what's the least common denominator? In this case, 4x. Let me multiply everything by 4x. This by 4x. I'm going to multiply this by 4x and here by 4x. The 4x with the 4x cancel out, so I get x plus 3. 1 times 4x, I have 4x. The 4x with the 4x cancel out, so I have plus x minus 4. If there was a minus in between the fractions, change that to plus and distribute the negative to the second fraction like we did last week. Let me simplify each of my sides now. I have that x plus 3 is equal to 5x minus 4. Let me subtract an x. Let me add a 4. So I have that 7 is equal to 4x. So x is equal to 7 divided by 4. That's a number. It's a good number because it's not on my list of the numbers I cannot accept. When you type this is 7 over 4. First thing you got to do is look for the values of x you cannot accept. Second of all, look for your LCD to get rid of fractions. On your answers that you get, make sure they're not on the list of the numbers you cannot accept. Some of your answers on your homework, you might get 2 answers at the end. For example, I'm working things out, and I get that x is equal to 2 and x equals 5. Whenever you typed it, make sure you put a 2, a comma, a space, and a 5. Some of your answers in the homework will have more than one answered. So a reminder, on your instructions, I'm giving you, remember to check for extraneous solutions. What that means is make sure your answers you can accept. You have a list of the numbers you cannot accept. Make sure your answers are not on that list.